Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon, and today I'm going to be explaining all of the key timers to you in Wild Rift, things to keep track of so that you're never confused at different points in the game, and you understand the different phases of the game, and what you should be doing at those points in the game. I'm going to go through some examples and sort of show you guys different types of situations, different things you should be doing. And so starting off is going to be the early game. The first 2 to 3 minutes of the game, this is largely focused on lane phase. This is where junglers are farming up to get level 2, or level 5 rather. This is where the laners are playing to see if they can get any type of advantage in their lane, whether it's a solo kill, whether it's denying gold from the enemy, anything like this. And so if you're a laner in this case, your main goal is to utilize, the laning fundamentals that we've spoken about in plenty of our different videos to get some type of advantage. If you see an opportunity to get an advantage in your lane itself, then you're going to play for the lane. You're going to try to kill your opponent. You're going to try to get an advantage. Or you might find yourself in a case like this, where Zyra is not necessarily a champion I can kill right away. And so my goal is going to be to spend as little time as possible in my lane. So if I find an opportunity to push my lane like I did, then I'm going to then use that opportunity to rotate. So basically there's going to be two different goals of this lane, or of this, first 2 to 3 minutes of the game. Either to get an advantage in the lane itself, as we spoke about, or to only spend time in that lane when there is a wave, and then pretty much be leaving when you don't have a wave. When you're leaving, you can do things like rotate, you can do things like ward, you can recall, any of these types of things. And so in this specific example, as you see, I realized I don't have much of an opportunity to actually kill my laner, and I also noticed some stuff going on where I could help my team, and so I did exactly that, got myself a bit of an advantage, utilized that time properly, and then got myself a recall. And so then this is where you're shifting into the next point of the game. So the first roughly 2 to 3 minutes, again, that is the lane phase. That's where people are getting to level 5. Junglers are doing their first full clear. Generally, you're not going to move very much. Even the amount that I roamed in this game is very rare that you're actually going to move this much. But then we shift into kind of the second phase of the game, which is going to be the next roughly 2 minutes until the dragon spawns. Maybe even 3 minutes. Something around there, 2 to 3 minutes. This is going to be the time of the game where now people can be in other areas of the map more frequently. The mid laner is going to be level 5, so if he wants to roam and gank you, he more likely can. For example, if he's a Galio, a Twisted Fate with his ultimate, they're going to have more tools to then, rotate and gank. And so it's going to be more frequent that you're going to see plays like this, where a mid laner or even a top laner, a bottom laner, whoever will push the lane and then try to rotate, try to help their team, try to do something like that, rather than just purely playing for lane. When it comes to jungles will now be starting their second full clear, because around 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 2 minutes and 40 seconds is when junglers camp that they originally started on will be around the time that it will respawn again. So then that's going to be the second full clear that will commence for those junglers. And that full clear, usually if they do it properly, will be done around 4 minutes. And so they'll have some time within that time frame to potentially gank or other things like that. So really the important things to understand, first 2 or 3 minutes of the game, that's where you're just going to be playing mostly for lane, getting some type of advantage most of the time, finding maybe your first recall for some type of lead. Then you're going to have that next 2 to 3 minutes before the dragon, where it's more likely that people could be roaming, ganking you, making other plays, having their ultimate, having more tools to potentially make plays, but still frequently they could be playing for their lane phase as well. And the way you're going to decide on whether you want to play more for your lane or more for leaving, and again, this is applicable to any lane, not just mid lane, it's typically going to be if you think you can get a big advantage. If you think you can get a big advantage by continuing to stay and kill your laner, then you can do that. But if you feel like you're not really able to find opportunities to kill your laner, then in that case, you can simply leave and again, push the lane and then rotate. And when it comes to jungle, again, these are very similar timers. They're going to be playing around all of these laners kind of plays. The thing to understand about junglers is their first full clear, they're going to usually finish around 2 minutes. Then their second, kind of the side that they started on will start respawning again around 2:30, and then they'll typically clear it anywhere from 3:45 to 4:30 is when they're usually going to finish that second, full round of camps. And then that's going to bring us into the next point of the game. Around 4 minutes and 30 seconds, as you currently see us in here, that is when you're going to start setting up for objectives. Laners are going to push their lanes. The laners / junglers are going to recall for their items before the objective. We're going to try to start setting up for this objective, deciding on which objective to go for. That's typically what junglers are going to be doing, something along those lines. So here, for example, you saw me push my lane out because then I wanted to be able to rotate to help on an objective. Now, it turned out in this case that we were able to get a gank off. And so sometimes that's what's going to happen as well, is fights are going to break out before the objective. that's going to lead to things like this, where then the turret gets killed or you find a gank or whatever. And in this case, sometimes you're going to recall a bit later. But typically what's going to happen is around, again, 4:30, 4:40, the final recalls will happen. The people will set up for the objectives, and then there will be a choice. Either the junglers will choose to contest the same objectives, or they'll trade. In this case, we made the play again on the Herald side of the map, while the enemy jungler made the play on the Dragon side. So in this case, what happened was a trade. Now, because again, we got that kill that you guys saw on the turret and bot side, we didn't actually go for the objective. But most of the time, what will happen is that the objective will be taken, they'll be traded, or again, there will be a fight over whichever objective if the enemy junglers decide to go for both. Again, in this case, a little different, but still very similar concept, which is trading opposite side of the map, where we played on one side, the enemy played on the other side, which led to this kind of trading of an advantage, where we got the first turret, we got the gold lead there, but they got the dragon, which is going to help them scale a bit more overall. Okay, and then the next phase of the game is essentially going to be the time before the Baron, or before the second dragon spawns, but where there's nothing really specific to do. There's no objective up. Essentially, it's just a free-for-all at this point. The first dragons have been taken, the first herald's been taken, and now we kind of are just playing to get as much gold on ourselves as possible before the second dragon and before the Baron. And so when it comes to these types of, or this point in the game, the main goal is just get gold on yourself, which means you need to prioritize pushing your wave before you make other plays. If you are the mid laner, you should push your mid wave before making a play. If you are the bot laner, you should push your lane before rotating. If you are the jungler, you need to farm your camps before ganking, before looking for plays, because gold is all that matters at this point in the game. If you can get yourself a gold lead before the second dragon or the first Baron, that is how you're going to be happy. And so you're going to do it by doing things like you saw here, where I pushed out my mid wave first, and then I looked for this rotation. Now that I've looked for this rotation, I'm trying to get as much as I can out of this rotation, which means stopping the enemy from recalling so that they have to waste more time, while simultaneously putting my teammates in a position to take the turret, which is exactly what we're going to do here, where you're going to see us get the turret. I'm going to skip through a little bit since you guys see, right, obviously we got the turret. And so that's really what we're looking for. I use that to get myself a bunch of gold, then I spend my gold, and now, or well, I guess in this case, they ended up stopping my recall, but then I go and spend my gold after we end up in this kind of weird fight that happened. And then we look for again, the recall. And now we're looking for the next point in gold once again. So that's where the mid lane comes in. I'm going back to my wave once again, making sure I get this wave pushed out. Now, in this case, it ends up getting a bit funky again, because obviously games never go in the most straightforward planned manner as possible. But you saw again the prioritization of that middle wave before something else. Sometimes, obviously, things don't go as planned. Fights happen. And so what do I do now? I look for another wave. Once again, because there's no actual reason to fight, because there's no objective, there's no nothing, I'm just looking for gold. Once again, getting as much gold on wherever in the map I can. Essentially, whatever wave is open, whatever wave's not covered, whatever turret's available to take, whatever turret I need to protect, that is the entire goal. And then this is where you shift into the next phase, where now the second dragon is spawning. You can see in 30 seconds, that's when dragon spawning usually happens around 9:30 to 10, 11 minutes in the game, depending on how quickly the first dragon was taken. Now that this is happening, what do? We prioritize middle lane priority, pushing the middle lane wave, having control over that, so that we can then go and fight over the objective. And so that's exactly what we put ourselves in a position to do. Now, again, obviously mistakes happen. I shouldn't have gone this far forward. But the general thing that's important to keep in mind in this timer, in this way, this time of the game, is you're trying to get control over the waves so that you can then rotate into the objective. Whereas before this time, the goal was to just get gold, make yourself as strong as possible before this fight. So it's kind of all culminating, all leading up to this dragon. And there's two things you can do at this dragon. If you're strong or your team is even gold or you're in a good spot, you're going to want to fight this dragon and try to use it to snowball your lead further. Now, if you're behind a lot, you're going to use this dragon as a distraction. You're not going to fight this dragon because the second dragon doesn't really matter in terms of the objective itself, because the enemy still can't get soul yet. So say we were behind in this game, what I would prefer to do is go towards the bottom lane instead of the top lane and get gold and get waves in there. So essentially this timer has two main goals. It's either you're in a pretty good spot, you're even or ahead in gold, so you want to fight, so you use that dragon as a way to fight. You set up around the mid wave, pushing your mid wave, pushing the wave that's on the side of the dragon, and then playing for that fight. Or again, if you are behind and you're not in a good spot to fight, you go on the other side of that dragon about 30 to 45 seconds beforehand. You try to get as much gold as possible on there while using the dragon as a distraction and finding some type of lead there. Then you're going to find yourself in another lull state where, similar to before the first or after the first dragon and before the second dragon, where there's no real objective, the same thing happens after the second dragon is killed until Baron spawns. Now, Baron spawns at 12 minutes, and so within that time frame where Baron is not yet spawned, you're once again looking for gold. And so you see me once again shifting into that place where I'm trying to get the bottom lane wave. I'm looking for gold. I'm seeing, you know, obviously if I can find a kill or anything like that, or just any type of way to get gold. So now my goal here is to hit my item spikes before this Baron spawns, which is why you see me going for the Gromp, because I want to hit my Deathcap power spike. So essentially, again, the way you can really think about the game is objectives they draw you to a certain part of the map. So again, early on, the objective is essentially just your turret, your wave. You know, the first 5 minutes of the game is just the lane phase. That's just what you're fighting around. Then the first dragon / herald becomes your objective. Then when there's nothing up after those have been taken, your new objective, once again, similar to the lane phase, is just get gold, get strong. Then the dragon spawns, you know, the next dragon. That's your new objective. Then the dragon's dead. Now, once again, get gold, get strong, hit your item spikes. Then Baron spawns. Now, the focus is to make sure the Baron's not taken. And so that's where we're currently at in this game. I've gotten myself quite strong. I've done proper farming within those timers that we spoke about. And so now I'm looking for whatever type of priority I can get so that the Baron is possible and we can deny the enemy from getting Baron. This is why I prioritize the mid lane here, because the mid lane gives me the most control over objectives, because you can obviously have access into any part of the map if you have control over the mid lane wave. And so we're pushing the mid lane wave first, and then now looking for fights around the Baron, because if we win a fight around Baron, we get the Baron. We don't want to be fighting around the top side right now, because Baron's nowhere near there, and then even if I get a kill there, I'm still far away from the Baron, and if I die there, then again, it's just not going to be super valuable. Now, if you're a Baron laner at this time, you want to be on the opposite side of where the Baron is. The reason that a Baron laner wants to be on the opposite side is because they want to draw pressure away from the Baron so that the enemy can't just group as 5 around the Baron, as you kind of see us doing, right? Where we're able to get a lot of control because we're able to group really nicely. If they had a Baron laner on that side of the map, kind of grouping and potentially drawing pressure, it'd be a lot harder for them to be as successful, or for us to be as successful, rather. And so that's where you need to understand kind of your role in the game as well, where some champions' role is to draw pressure away from the objective, and so essentially all of these timers I spoke about are going to be sort of reversed, where if you're a split pushing champion who wants to grab a lot of pressure on other parts of the lane, you're going to have to go on the opposite side of wherever the key objective is. So when we're on that timer where the Baron's really important, you're going to go on the opposite side to draw pressure if you're a split pushing champion who wants to draw pressure. Or if you're you know, a team fighting champion, then you're going to want to be on the same side of wherever this objective's spawning. So understanding those types of things about the timers as well is really quite important. And then again, once again, this is kind of the next timer where it's going to be the final dragon, and there's going to be a couple differences in this situation as well. So if one team has both of the first 2 dragons, then you want to probably prioritize fighting this dragon. Because if you have 2 dragons, you want to try to get the 3rd dragon for soul. If the enemy has 2 dragons, you want to get the 3rd dragon to deny the enemy's soul. If each team has 1 dragon, then that dragon doesn't matter, because nobody can get soul, and 1 dragon buff is not very useful. So these are essentially the things you need to understand. Now, it's also important to note that during this timer, if you're the team with 2 dragons, but you're behind in gold, you don't have to fight, because you already have denied the enemy's soul. So even though you might be wanting that soul, you don't necessarily have to fight if you think it's a losing fight. But overall, understanding this timer, it's essentially one team has both dragons, then you probably need to fight. Neither team has both dragons, each team has 1, probably don't need to fight. That's essentially the short you know, explanation. Obviously it's a bit more detailed as we kind of spoke about some of the nuances, but that's typically how this timer is going to work. And so then once you find yourself finishing that timer, where you once again have prioritized potentially fighting this dragon or potentially not, depending on the scenario you're in, you're going to enter the final phase of the game. This is really the late game. So now every dragon's been taken, and you're waiting for 18 minutes when Elder Dragon spawns. Now, when Elder Dragon spawns, this is essentially where everything is based around. Whoever gets the Elder Dragon usually wins the game. If you get the Elder Dragon, you then need to go get Baron and use the Baron to officially end the game. And if you lose the Elder Dragon, you probably need to push out waves to make sure that the enemy can't immediately end after they get Baron, or maybe camp on the Baron to see if you can get a quick steal if you're like hiding over the wall. These are the types of things you need to understand. But the really important part then is, you know, there is going to be this timer within like, you know, 2-ish minutes where there's no dragon, there's no herald, or there's no Elder Dragon, there's no second dragon, there's none of it. And this is going to be a time where once again you're just trying to get as much gold, or maybe one shot a Lee Sin for fun, you know, like I did there. But you're then going to be setting up. Potentially there's a Baron opportunity if Baron is up. So that's also going to be another thing. Either Baron will be up or it'll be dead already. So if Baron is up, obviously that's the major objective until the 18-minute mark. And if there's no Baron, then there really is just no kind of objective, and you're mostly just playing around, just waiting for that Elder Dragon. So it's, again, you can just see there's these timers in between these certain objective timers where you're just trying to get gold on yourself. You're trying to be strong for that dragon fight, that herald fight, that whatever. And then once those objectives come, that's where it all kind of culminates into you guys either choosing to fight because you're stronger, or because it's a really important objective, or choosing to give up that objective because the objective may not matter, such as a third dragon or a second dragon, where, you know, so like a third dragon where each team has one dragon already, or the second dragon where you're behind and you don't yet need to fight that because you want to get stronger and wait. These are the different types of scenarios where sometimes you're going to decide to fight, sometimes you decide not to fight. And then usually what ends up happening is either you're going to end the game before the Elder because you got some type of Baron you were already winning, or you're going to grab the Elder and then use the fact that you get the Elder to get the Baron and end the game. Now in this case, I believe we end up ending the game before we get the Elder because we were already ahead. But there's going to be other cases where instead you need to utilize the fact that you get the Elder Dragon, you win that final team fight to then get the Baron and then end the game, basically in the same way you saw here. So I hope that kind of helped you guys understand some different timers of Wild Rift games. Again, to reiterate the main timers, there's going to be the first 2 or 3 minutes where you're mostly focused on lane, getting an advantage, gauging what type of lane you're in. Are you in a lane that's easy to kill, where you can play for your lane harder for the next 2 or 3 minutes? Or are you in a lane where you can't do as much and you want to try to just push that and then get, you know, across the map, be on other parts of the map until your wave comes back again? Then you get to the next timer, which is going to be about 4 minutes, 30 seconds to 5 minutes, when the first 2 objectives are spawning, where you're going to prioritize whichever objective seems most valuable to you, again, based on the things we spoke about. Then after that, you're going to have the timer in between where first dragon was taken and second dragon hasn't yet spawned. The goal there is to get gold, get yourself strong, be as strong as possible for that second dragon. Then you're going to potentially fight or give that second dragon based on what you decide. Then after that, again, as we spoke about, you're going to have a little bit of lull time before the Baron spawns, and then the Baron will spawn at 12 minutes, where that now becomes your main focus. Again, if Baron is taken, then once again, obviously you're going to use it to push, or you're going to defend depending on who took it. Then the main timer after that is the Elder Dragon at 18 minutes, where you're, again, really everything's kind of leading up to that Elder Dragon, where if you get the Elder Dragon, you use it to hit then Baron and then end the game. So I hope these timers were kind of, you know, explained well enough so you guys could sort of understand what I'm talking about. If you have any questions about the timers, or you're confused about anything or anything like that, let me know in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later.